Our show's what you know. We'll always watch TV. And if you think we can't, we'll watch more and you'll see. That's why the people of the web believe in Jim from Las Vegas and Jacob from Sweden.
Shows What You Know, your television podcast. I am Jim from Las Vegas.
And I'm Jacob from Sweden. And my favorite animal, growing up and still, is the penguin. Did you know that about me, Jim?
I didn't know that. So, I mean, how apropos.
How apropos indeed. Today we're discussing, amongst other things, The Penguin Episode 2. We'll save that for the end as we might get into some spoilers on that one. But yeah, penguins, I always loved them, had loads of stuffed toys of them, that type of thing. Always kind of suspected there was some connection between liking penguins and having autism, but I never really put it together. But regardless, Jim, speaking of stuffed animals, toys, and dolls, we're going to be starting out with some sad news today.
Yes, very true. To start out real quick with some news before we get into what we've been watching. I've mentioned this show as what I've been watching. Chucky. Everyone knows I love a good horror TV show. Chucky has been canceled after 3 seasons at Sci-Fi and USA Network. The series was complicated because it was on, I think it was on Peacock, Sci-Fi, and USA, which honestly they should do with more shows. Like sometimes shows will have this thing where they're on the network, but they're not on the streaming channel yet, and then they're going to be on the streaming channel like when the season's done. So they were kind of doing the right thing, but I think it was also confusing. I think at the time they tried to do a weird staggered release. Like initially they tried to do the thing where the episodes would be on Peacock like 2 weeks later or something dumb like that. They finally got it all going. Apparently it was the most watched show. The first part of season 3 was the most watched show since 2021 on Sci-Fi. Then they canceled it. I mean, part of it could have been due to there was the strike. So I think they aired 5 or 6 episodes last October. And then with the strike, obviously everything took a break. And then it kind of randomly came back around April or so this past year. And I guess maybe those back half episodes didn't do quite that well. Or I've also heard that Sci-Fi is kind of moving away from scripted television into a little bit more reality. So Chucky is the victim of that. Don Mancini, the creator of Chucky, says, "I'm heartbroken over the news that Chucky won't be coming back for a 4th season, but I'm so grateful for the killer 3 years we did have. I'd like to thank UCP, Sci-Fi, Peacock, Eat the Cat, our awesome cast, and Toronto-based crew, the best in the business, and finally to our amazing fans. A big bloody hug. Your incredible #Renew Chucky campaign really warmed Chucky's cold heart. Chucky will return. He always comes back." Which is true. Chucky does. You know, you kill him, you think he's done, and he comes back. The show did end on essentially a cliffhanger, kind of, at least where it left our main characters. So the one of the best things about it is that Mancini has kept this bizarre, crazy timeline. Even when this show launched, it kind of launched almost as a soft reboot, but then slowly worked in all the lore of the previous, I think, 6 movies, something like that. So there's no doubt in my mind that we'll get another film, and it'll just kind of play into all the more lore that they added from the show, like Chucky being in the White House, Chucky getting old, stuff like that.
Yeah, I was, well, you said it was the most watched show on Sci-Fi at the time. So what was it watched by, like 12 people, or what's the story there? Because I just went to like list of programs broadcast by Sci-Fi, and because these channels don't, I mean, they don't, no channels really exist today, right? That's why they had to do that weird staggered release. Like, shows are just brands on their own, and, you know, HBO is certainly a thing, and Netflix is a thing, and everything else is just a fucking mess. But as far as Sci-Fi, I just went to their like, a long list here on Wikipedia, and was scrolling through, like, there's a lot of reality shows on here. But, yeah, I guess they have, what do they have on here else? They had a Van Helsing show. Z Nation, Being Human. That's a show. I've seen that. Merlin. I guess they put Merlin on there. That was on BBC here. Channels aren't real anyway. They don't exist anymore. That's my takeaway here. So Chucky can't be killed. He shall return.
Yeah, Resident Alien, I think that's the Alan Tudyk show. I've watched a few episodes of that, although it looks like that's moving to USA Network. Maybe they're like, hey, this show's actually getting popular. Why do we have it on Sci-Fi? Let's move it to one of our actual networks. But yeah, I wanted to get that out of the way real quick. I'm bummed, but I'm still hopeful because I don't feel like it's the last we've seen of Chucky. And what I love is that Brad Dourif, the voice of Chucky, has retired from acting, but he did say when he retired, except for Chucky. He'll always come back and be the voice of Chucky, which rules. So there you go. I mean, nothing else really big in the news except, Last of Us Season 2 trailer, stuff like that. You've seen it. You heard about it. Let's move on.
What did you know? You've been watching. Tell me again. Oh.
Jacob.
Well, Jim, yes. Can we start with the one that we've both definitely watched?
Agatha?
Yes, Agatha All Along.
I don't know. When you said that, I'm like, shit, which one?
Yeah, that's fair. Agatha All Along, just because last week I'd seen the first couple episodes. You hadn't seen any yet. Now 3 episodes are out at the time we're recording this of Agatha All Along. And you know what? I'm just dying to get your take on these witchy ladies.
Are you fully caught up now? I've watched all 3 episodes.
I'm also fully caught up, yeah. So I guess, spoiler free for now, but we might say some spoilers later on. We'll let you know.
Yeah, if we get, I doubt we'll get into any spoilers, but if we do, there'll be a warning ahead of time. I'm with you. It's a good show. It's it's what, like, they're kind of setting up this Wizard of Oz like tale. Like, they're on this journey, which is fun. I mean, Agatha is who's the actress that plays her? Catherine Hahn. Catherine Hahn's great. She's always been great. I believe we watched. I for some reason I kept thinking of the Amazon pilot that we watched. I think it was called I Love Dick. There's something like that.
Yeah.
And that was with Catherine Hahn in it as well. Like, I feel like it's great to see her in a starring role like this because, I mean, I could be wrong. I'm sure she's had some different breakout starring roles, but from my memory, she's more so a supporting actress in most things I've seen her in, and she's always great. So it's nice to see her front and center. I have I guess love-hate's not the right description, but I don't always love Aubrey Plaza. But recently I've liked her in a lot of things. I mean, Ingrid Goes West isn't that recent, but I recently saw she has a movie here in theaters in the States, an indie movie called My Old Ass that she's in. That she's very good in. It's like the basic, I mean, we're a TV show, but we're a TV podcast, but for that movie, the basic gist is a girl does shrooms and is visited by her 39-year-old self. And like, they have these conversations and it's like a coming of age story. But also she's only in sparingly so far in these 3 episodes, but I like what she brings to the show as well. It also does harken back to her role in Legion, a show we famously did not really enjoy.
Very much so.
But yeah, no, like, on one hand, you're taking a villain and then putting them front and center. And with Disney, the track record is not that great, in my opinion. I mean, nothing's really popping to mind, but usually, like, they soften them up a bit. And obviously, I guess, Agatha, you kind of softened somewhat, but she's always been more of a whimsy character that has, like, a dark past that we've only hinted at. And there's still elements of that here, but, the rousing, like, let's get a team together and let's go on this journey of these first 3 episodes, I'm in. I'm enjoying. I do want to see a little bit more, even though it's kind of more of a WandaVision bag. I would like to see a little bit more of other TV shows playing in. I enjoyed how they started out the show with kind of that handoff of WandaVision of, like, being stuck in a TV show. In this case, it was a crime drama.
Yeah, it seems like they're maybe not going to do any more of that with all that meta bullshit that we love. Maybe it'll come up later as a trial for Agatha or whatever, but it's funny, everything you said, I was there like last time, right? Everything you said, and then episode 3, I just didn't really enjoy that much, to be honest. It's kind of, the first 2 episodes are the setup, you get launched into the story. They kind of, in a way, play the role of a pilot put together. They're not particularly long episodes, and they do basically get to the point of them crossing the threshold into the unknown world, starting the adventure. They've gotten the gang together, all those tropes we love. But then the 3rd episode, I was just kind of like, ugh. Because now it's like, oh, we have to face these trials, and there'll be one trial for each of us, and the first trial is fucking boring. And I'm like, oh no, I hope that every trial doesn't get its whole own episode like this one, which I don't think they'll do.
I don't like that though. I'm down.
Yeah,
I mean, because that's almost a episode of the week type flavor that we say that we want.
I'm on board with it in theory. I think the problem for me is the usual good old problem of this is kind of bullshit. This is kind of a dream sequence nonsense. You're in a magical world, but it's whimsy, and it's like being in a fairyland, and weird things are happening, and it's a trial, but now there's water coming through the window, and now we have to escape through this, and we're all having hallucinations, and our faces get big. I think it's when their faces got big. Not really a spoiler, but their faces got big at one point, and I was like, all right, what are we doing here, guys? Is this just like for the prosthetics department, or what's going on? But I did hear that this is actually one of the cheaper shows they've made in terms of production budget, for like one of the cheaper Marvel shows for sure. Actually, the cheapest Marvel show in terms of the production budget as far as what I have read, meaning that it's actually doesn't need as high of a viewership to be profitable, which is an interesting equation to think about. Apparently, previously, they'd said that the last Marvel show that they made that had the lowest budget was like 40 million, meaning that the budget of this would be under 40 million, which is quite a difference to, say, The Acolyte, which was like 180 million or something for just a few episodes there.
Echo was the ones previously. Well, yeah, right. And also, I mean, maybe it helped because I watched these 3 episodes in a row, so it's like there actually was no delineation at all. To me, it was like one big episode, and I was like, all right, well, and then that's done, and let's see where we go from here.
I think that's totally it, and I don't even think that episode, the 3rd episode, is that bad. It's just that it was kind of interrupted and then came back to an underwhelming one compared to what had been set up before it. But anyway, I referenced the budget because the 3rd episode is also kind of a bottle episode. Like, it more or less takes place in one location, which is probably one of the ways they can keep it reasonably cheap. I didn't hate it, but I was slightly less enthused than I was after the first 2. But, there's not that many episodes. There's going to be 9 in total, I believe. So, I'm still with it. But some just slightly less positive than after the first couple episodes, personally.
Well, what's interesting, even because I saw those headlines about being its lowest budget, because part of it is, they're talking about the viewership. The first 2 episodes got 9.3 million in the first week or something like that. And people like, well, the Acolyte had over 11 million around that same time. So it feels like this is a weird response of well, yeah, but the Acolyte costs $180 million. This show costs less. But it's weird that I don't think of any of these Marvel shows as ooh, what are they going to do for season 2? I mean, maybe Agatha will be different. Obviously, The Acolyte was a show that ended with the idea of hey, we'll be back for season 2, which it isn't. But it's interesting because I never thought of this show, and maybe by the end I'll think differently. I never thought of this as oh, there's going to be a season 2. It's oh, here's the Agatha show, and then we'll do the fucking, whatever character from Agatha gets a viral hit will be there next. That this is essentially WandaVision season 2, and then WandaVision season 3 will be the unknown boy from this show when we find out that he's actually Iron Man reborn or something. You know what I mean? Whatever thing.
Yeah, well, that makes sense because in the Marvel universe, they all kind of stack on top of each other. They're all part of the same continuity. So whether one show is canceled, that character can still come up again in a different show. So it is, to be fair, they do have built, I guess, what should we call it? Some sort of universe, but it's like a universe in cinema. We'll have to think of something, Jim. But it is billed as a mini-series, Agatha All Along as well. So that's how they've described it. So I would presume that means there's not going to be an Agatha All Too Long or something like that for the second season. You never know.
They did, I forget what it was. There was something they did that too not too long ago where they built it as a miniseries, but then it did really well. And then they were like, oh, you know what? We're going to do... Oh, it was Loki, actually.
Shogun. Oh, okay.
So Shogun as well. But Loki, I believe, was nominated in limited series like Emmys and stuff like that. But then they were like, hey, we're going to do a season 2. And it's like, people are like, well, that's kind of fucked up because you're going up against other things. Like this was after the fact. So, but don't put it above Disney to be like, oh, hey, people are watching this. We'll do another one. Well, yeah, I think I'm with you. It's not like, well, not that I think this is like an empty statement to make, but I don't like when people do it, but I do it myself where I'm like, oh, it's not amazing, but it's pretty good. But also no show for the most part is like amazing 3 episodes in. I mean, most shows are pretty good, and then you realize after the fact they're amazing. So it almost goes without saying, but I don't know why we're always compelled to be like, watch it. It's not perfect, but I maybe we're just like setting up excuses in case we tell someone to watch something and they're like, that sucked, you fucking moron. You don't know shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the premise of our podcast. So, yeah. I keep telling you, have you watched Garth Marenghi yet, Jim? You bastard. I don't think so. Yeah, that was on Sci-Fi too. I saw it on the list. That's what's reminded me, you cunt.
I was waiting for Halloween season, and it's almost October.
Yeah. Yes, it is, Jim. Well, anyway, that's Agatha All Along.
Yeah.
Watch it.
You can watch it. Tell me
Oh. Speaking of limited series, I did watch the new Netflix miniseries, docuseries event, Mr. McMahon, based on the life of WWF pioneer Vincent Kennedy McMahon Jr.
So let me cut in here. This is another one of those where I'm like, okay, it's one of those that's like really deep. For a moment, I was like, I know that name. Is that a football name or is that a wrestling name? And it's a wrestling name, right? It's like he's like
Correct.
The guy.
It's the wrestling name, yes.
Yeah. It's the wrestling name in WWE. You're American, the big explosive over the top wrestling, not the sweaty roll around on the floor wrestling, right? That's what we're talking about.
He's essentially the Walt Disney of wrestling, and like,
right.
I think people would maybe scoff at that, but then when they thought about it for a second, they're like, you know what, you're absolutely right. He's the Bill Gates.
I didn't question it for a second. Yeah, brilliant. Great. He's the CEO of WWE.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but he's also like, they were making this documentary for a bit, and I'm like a year or 2 or something, and they must have been salivating at the mouth when within the past year and a half, a lot of these lawsuits and controversy started hitting, which is in a weird way, to me, it's kind of a detriment to the documentary. Because, I mean, Vince McMahon, he is obviously he's accused of some heinous acts of, sexual harassment and defecating on a woman. And
okay, that wasn't obvious to me. That's when I think Walt Disney, I think Nazi, but I don't think defecating on children, or what was it, women.
And also, that's just a fucking myth, isn't it? Anyways, isn't it? The whole Walt Disney Jew thing. Look at all these movies; they're all Jewish. But anyway, so like, I get it. You have to cover this stuff, and you have to frame your documentary around it. I can't blame them for that. The only thing that's tough is I feel like this is that portion of it would serve better if we were 5 years removed. Like a lot of since our hunger for documentaries is so strong, a lot of these documentaries don't get the time they need to really like have hindsight on some of these things to properly like get into it. Which again, it's not their fault. Like they have to put it in there. It's still ongoing. It has to end with like some paragraphs on the screen or whatever. So it's hard to really get into that portion of it. The other stuff around it, as far as like his life and his impact on the business, essentially he didn't create professional wrestling, obviously, but he created what we now know as the modern day professional wrestling, like this whole thing of international superstars, pay-per-view, like a lot of pioneering aspects of like building a business. And they get into a lot of that. They get into a lot of like, and one thing I didn't really know, and I don't know, it's hard to say how much of it is 100% true. I'm sure there's truth there, but I didn't really know that he grew up mostly poor, not knowing who his father was. And then he like met his dad at like 12. And his dad ran what was like, I think it was initially like the WWF, and then it became like the WWF. But that was in the days when wrestling here in America was broken up in territories. So it's like the Northeast was the WWF. Then there was like Southern territories, there was some Midwest, whatever. And they all kind of like, it's almost like the Five Families or some shit. Like they all just, this is our territory. These are our guys. We put on our shows. We do local events or local televised things. And what Vince is known for is he was the guy. He ended up he bought the company from his father. And the way he pitches it is how like, you know, if you have to come up with this end of the deal, this much money. If you don't, then I'm taking I get to take the company back. So he hit these goals. And then he started buying up names from other territories and really built. He was like, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck about that shit. I'm gonna have a national brand. And then that slowly rolled out through the 80s to like pay-per-view and international and into this huge company and all the different trials and tribulations along the way. He was caught up in a steroid trial. He was, the company was almost basically squished out of existence as their main competitor was WCW, which was backed by Time Warner or like Ted Turner, like, you know, CNN, TBS, whatever, Turner Broadcasting. And it goes through all of that. So it's a good watch. I do feel like they do. He's also famously known for in the 90s when wrestling became like its pinnacle, like when it was super like it's popular now, but in the late 90s when they were like Jerry Springer, Howard Stern, like everything was edgy and fucking out there. They were huge. And at the time, he played the character of a heel boss, like the villainous boss, Mr. McMahon. That was the character. I mean, he's Vince McMahon, the person, but he played this character, Mr. McMahon. And I get it. You have to show those as far as like, well, some people think he's really like that, so let's show the stuff he does on TV. But they almost lean on it a little bit too much, in my opinion. And the whole thing
what's the name of the documentary, right? Mr. McMahon.
And the whole nature of wrestling is that it is carny shit. Like it is like it's carny con men. Like that's what it's based off of. They have their own lingo and their own words. Like that's where you hear. Well, I mean, I don't think they invented heel, but like things like kayfabe, which is for the longest time they would never admit that it was predetermined or that it was scripted.
Yeah.
They were a character. And you never broke what's called kayfabe, which is your character. If you were out in public somewhere, even if you weren't working, and you were a heel, you would have to be that guy. And obviously, throughout the times, that's blurred, and they're more open about that and how that plays out. Or it's things like jabroni, like, and they're building heat, stuff like that. It's all carny bullshit of getting a crowd riled up and getting any type of reaction. And that's what I love about wrestling. I can't watch wrestling now because it's just boring to me. But I love the backstage stuff. I love hearing about the real life drama and how these people would either hate each other, love each other. The the feuds that would build and the friendships and stuff. So this was like right up my alley. I enjoyed it for the most part. And
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say I was reading about how McMahon apparently has expressed interest in purchasing the rights to this documentary to prevent its distribution, aiming to ensure it's not widely seen. Now, that's one of those things that's like, I don't know how much of a character he's playing there, because that is what the villainous caricature of the boss would do, right? Like, buy all the newspapers so no one can read that I'm a criminal, right? So it's interesting. It's a world that's completely foreign to me, but I feel like this would be a pretty good inroad, because I would be interested in all of the machinations and the business side and how it grew, like understanding wrestling as a concept. And it sounds like you can't really understand that without understanding this man. So sounds pretty interesting to me. Now, I do have to ask, this is a Netflix documentary. Should it have been 6 episodes, or was it a bit much?
I think six episodes actually isn't bad, because they do essentially go in to the history of the business. Well, not just the business, but the WWF. They go through a lot of the major time frames. Like they focus on the 80s and like the rise of Hulk Hogan, and then how that started to peter out, and how do you, like, a big part of it is how Vince or the WWE had to continually build new stars and what that entails. And then they get into, obviously, a lot with his character. They get into a lot with his family and how it relates to, like, his own relationships with his kids. So I actually don't feel like it was stretched too much. I know wrestling fans are like, they didn't get into this, or they didn't cover this. So with wrestling fans, it's almost like too little. So yeah, no, I didn't get that from this. What's weird too, because I feel like this was brought up, the idea of doing this documentary was brought up in a different way, because WWE did sign a huge, like a multi-billion-dollar deal where Monday Night Raw is WWE's main show. I mean, they have a Friday night show as well, but like their big show where they lay out their storylines and everything like that is Monday nights on USA Network. They signed a deal with Netflix. It's moving to Netflix, I think, next year sometime. This has been a deal in the making for a while, so I think that's initially why they were making this documentary, but then all the shit hit the fan. So they kind of had to pivot and focus on a lot of the controversy, which, again, how could you not?
Yeah.
But one of the most interesting parts about it, too, is because it paints the picture of a guy that would never let go, which it's not new to wrestling fans. Vince is in his, like, 80s or something like that, and there was never a sign that he was going to let that company go. And he really had to be forced out. Like, it really came to this ultimate, like, he had no choice anymore, that he sold it and got forced out.
Right. Well, there's a spoiler for episode 6 if you want to check out Mr. McMahon on Netflix. But yeah, sounds good, Jim.
What did we say? Not even watch it. Tell me I
Well, Jim, let me tell you a little bit about a TV show that I didn't know anything about just like a week ago. Una had seen some clips of it. My partner Una had seen some clips of it on TikTok, and then it just randomly appeared on a streaming service that we have, and we were like, oh, well, give this a go. It's a little show started in 2019, and it has 6 seasons. It's currently airing its 6th seasons. But don't worry, these are UK seasons, so that's about 6 episodes each. Not too overwhelming. Now, the name of the show is Brassic. Have you heard about this show?
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's I don't know why I said that. It's very disparaging, but I had never heard of it, so of course no one can have heard of it. But it's a show that takes place in sort of northern England, in a sleepy northern English town. It stars Joe Gilgun, who plays Cassidy the vampire in Preacher. He's also known from many UK soaps, which is kind of a theme with the actors in this show. And he co-created the show with Danny Brocklehurst, who has a great name, and who was involved in the making of the original Shameless show, for which he won a BAFTA. So that's kind of the pedigree we've got. Now, to describe the show itself, it feels very early Guy Ritchie. It's like people with no money, who are basically thieves, in a sort of rundown northern English town in the countryside. That's kind of the basic plot of them stealing stuff, getting into silly situations, running cons, very low stakes cons that spin out of control. And I compared it to Guy Ritchie because there's that comedy, the situations, the way that they do spin out of control, all of that stuff. But instead of taking place in like fast-paced London, it's a somewhat derelict northern middle of nowhere bumfuck town where all these characters feel kind of trapped, and they've kind of been they don't have many prospects in life, and that's why they're hanging out, growing weed, just running cons. And I was just really pleasantly surprised by how funny this show was, how well put together it was, how much they fit into each episode. It's kind of like almost, it's not a sitcom, but it's almost like a situational comedy in the way that all of these ridiculous situations develop within just one episode. Like the first episode, they've been told they have to go steal a Shetland pony, like one of these really tiny horses or ponies, and then they're trying to do it with chloroform for some reason, because one of them has just bought chloroform off a man in the pub and they don't know if it's real chloroform. And then at the end, the bottle breaks in the car and they crash the car, and then they have to go get the person. In another episode, they're like running a con to steal someone's koi fish, someone who's really obsessed with like Japanese fish, and they've built this lovely indoor aquarium where they have to come up with an elaborate con. And then this fella comes out with a samurai sword in a kimono, and they're arguing about whether it's a replica sword or a decorative sword and all this stuff. And it's kind of hard to get across, but as you can tell maybe from those types of situations, the drama isn't necessarily so much about, are they going to manage to do this crime? Are they going to manage to Ocean's 11 their way through the sewers into the strip club's like back room to crack the safe, which is a very elaborate thing where someone's parked over the sewer entrance, so now they're trapped in there and making their way through mountains of shit. Like, that's mostly funny. And then the drama, the actual, like, what feels like high stakes is sort of the interpersonal relationships that lie underneath all of that. So the big tension isn't necessarily about, is this person going to get cut down with the samurai sword? In fact, when someone comes out with the samurai sword, the main character who Joe Gilgun, who does an amazing job as this very charismatic, but like a fuckhead. Like he's a nice guy, but he's not, like, he's an asshole basically at the same time, you know, one of those types of guys. And he like the tension when he's being threatened with a sword, it's not like, is he gonna get cut down with this sword? It's like, he's just like, no, what are you doing? I've got the kid here. Come on, we got to figure this out. Even though they've robbed this person previously and stuff, it's more about the bad decisions that these people are making, because they're constantly making bad decisions that's kind of causing different levels of drama. There's a slowly simmering plot in the first season of how they're getting closer to like actual big time criminals, like accidentally robbing off people who are, you know, much more seriously into crimes. Like, none of these characters seem like they've ever murdered anyone, you know, but they're sort of slowly inching towards deeper in the sort of world of crime. And it's all just really fucking funny. So Brassic, I haven't finished the first season yet, even though there's only 6 episodes, but pretty strong recommendation there from me. Even after the first episode, I was like, this is great. I'm so glad there are 6 seasons of this for me to watch.
Okay, so you haven't gotten through the first, because I was going to ask if that changes up a bit, if there's more of a, like, I don't know, an overarching narrative or like how they get into as they get later on. But I guess I'll have to see what you say.
There definitely is, because, yeah, it's kind of already happening a bit. Where am I at? I'm most of the way through season 1, and they've already like encountered this person who's like a big time criminal that is now threatening them, getting them to do stuff. And I don't know, it's probably never going to get as serious as a Breaking Bad, right? Because I can't imagine that it does. But then I'm only a few episodes in, and there are 6 seasons of this. Clearly what's hooked me into it and what hooks people into it, I presume, is more sort of the vibe and the way that it's put together. But they are doing a good job of building actual dramatic relationships between these characters. You kind of care about them mostly, and at the same time stakes do get higher throughout the season as well. So I don't know where it's going, but I have to assume that they are going to get pulled into more serious type crimes, and that's going to affect all of this as well. But they're still going to be fuckheads. So it might go to more of like, you know, might go from Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels to Snatch, right? Like, it might go from some like the fuckheads in a Guy Ritchie film to the more competent people in a Guy Ritchie film. I don't know. Well, we'll have to wait and see.
No, I'm intrigued. What network is it usually on, or is it just on a streaming network?
I mean, it's on Sky One. It's the most popular show on that network, but that's not a channel that exists. I was on this earlier. The channels don't really exist today. It's also on the Now TV streaming service that exists over here. That's what we watched it on, but that's not going to help you, is it, Jim?
My only frame of reference is BBC4 because I know that Spaced was on BBC4, so I was just hoping you'd say that, and I'd be like,
yeah,
again now. I understand.
Yeah, I don't know, but as I said, I'd never seen it or seen anything about it. It's interesting as well how many people in this show have kind of a background in the soaps. There's a lot of like UK soap operas type things, and several of the main characters and like the writer, they've both worked on these soaps that just run for years and years and years and just take place in some random English town, and it's about sort of the drama. And I've never watched any of them, but they just go on and on and on, and it's interesting how a lot of these people have worked together previously on those types of shows, and then clearly have come away from that going like, here's where we can take some of the stuff that works in a soap, because there's like these dramatic relationships about like, oh, it turns out someone is someone's father that they didn't, or like that kid we thought was actually, just from some random person in the past, you're actually the father. Like that's what would happen in one of those soap operas. But they've clearly taken what works from that stuff and then added their own sense of humor and like absurd situations, and the feeling, it really captures the feeling of being trapped in a rundown middle of nowhere town, and like, yeah, I gotta get out of this town or my life is gonna go to shit, and you're watching these people's lives go to shit in comedic slow motion.
So is it shot like an early Guy Ritchie film as well? Like is that how, like, filmmaking wise, or
it hasn't really, the craft of it hasn't really stuck out to me one way or another. Like it's not that it's incompetent or anything, or extremely competent. It's more, I don't even know. Sorry, the Guy Ritchie film, how does he shoot things? Shakes the camera around a lot, I guess, in the early ones?
It's very stylish. I mean, it's hard to gauge like on more recent Guy Ritchie movies. Like he doesn't have that same flair, I feel, that he used to. But if you think about like Snatch or like Lock, Stock, there would be these like, slow motion machine gun shooting, or like the boxing matches in Snatch, or like the quick, almost not quite the same as Edgar Wright, but like a lot of whips and connections and
there's definitely a bit of that, but it's like they have one scene where they're like walking in slow motion, and they do like a reference to Reservoir Dogs, where they're walking in slow motion, but they're walking in slow motion as they're leaving the sewers, and they're covered in shit, and one of them falls over, kind of. So it's kind of like a reference joke there, but a lot of it is like the Guy Ritchie association is more for me like the really rapid fire funny dialogue back and forth where they're yelling at each other in these absurd criminal type situations, But yeah, the filmmaking aspect is good, but it's not like something that's stuck. It's more like the way that they managed to do that stuff, and then also the mise en scène, the backdrop, the scenery is like this beautiful field, and there's just sheep in the background, but they're arguing about breaking into a strip club or whatever it is. And yeah, so far as you can tell, I'm really sold on it. So I'll keep you posted as I continue on through this show, because I'm definitely gonna catch my way up on it.
I like it.
What TV shows you've been watching? Tell me I'm
I don't really have anything else besides Survivor and The Challenge. Did you have anything else that you've been watching besides our main thing?
I had one, but I think I'm going to save it, because I want to spend some more time on our main, I guess our main feature today, The Penguin, episode 2.
Yeah, no, I'm with it. So coming off of episode 1, last week we were discussing it. We were both pretty positive on it. We talked a little bit about the, like, how could you not talk about the comparison to The Sopranos? We have kind of, an unwell mother, and like maybe some mommy issues with our character, who looks a lot like an uglier Gandolfini. I don't want to keep saying he looks like Gandolfini because he's a gross-looking man. I mean, they cover Colin Farrell with prosthetics to make him look gross as hell. But there are shades of Gandolfini with like the hairline and kind of the bearish body type. Plus, obviously, it's an anti-hero mob show. So, coming out of episode 2, what do we think? Is it like we still on board? Have they completely dropped the ball? Where are we at?
I mean, I'm still on board. It's not an Agatha All Along type situation for me. I felt like, again, they set things up very quickly in the first few minutes of the episode. What are the stakes? What's happening? And I realized what it is to me. It's like, it's The Sopranos if The Sopranos was really indulgent. And like, if it really indulged us as the viewers, because we always talked about on Cut to Black, our Sopranos podcast, our Sopranos sit down, we always talked about how, you know, David Chase, he never wants to give you what you want. You always want there to be a cool mob showdown, shoot down type situation, and he's not going to give you that. And much like I was just saying with Brassic, it's more about the interpersonal drama and all of that stuff, right? And that's what really makes it work. Now, the Penguin, there's like, you know, multiple shootouts. There's a lot of death. There's people getting cut up left, right, and center, which is in a more of a traditional mob type fashion, I suppose. But yeah, no, I'm still on board after episode 2. What about you?
No, yeah, I'm on board as well. They do the I mean, they do this in episode 1 as well, and they continue in episode 2. It's almost like like an Uncut Gems type scenario where it's all about the mounting pressure for our main character and how they're like, it's just fun seeing him getting caught like tighter and tighter in some of these situations, and how is he going to figure out a way how is he going to be quick on his feet that he figures out how to get out of it. Now these are tough things to do because a lot of shows attempt to do this, but then things come off, you know, very like a whimper almost, or what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, like it just doesn't come off as believable or something, like, or like you feel the writing too much, where you're like, oh, okay, well, the script says he gets out of it, so he gets out of it. I feel like they've done a good enough job where I feel like I buy Oz Cobb here, a.k.a. the Penguin, as this dude quick on his feet that can kind of figure these situations out. The only thing, if I could nitpick to maybe second guess, I'd be like, oh, why didn't he do any of this stuff sooner? But maybe it's just because he has this great opportunity here that it's finally like in front of him to really seek his potential. And like, he's really playing all sides here, but it's putting himself into messier situations that he keeps having to get himself out of. And so far, in my opinion, it's working.
If I can give you an example of that type of thing where you can feel the writing, maybe like a character is forced to drink a poison, and then they have to come up with an antidote, and you're like, well, these people are all main characters, so I'm not going to be too stressed out about them getting the antidote together in these 30 minutes or whatever, just as an example. But in the Penguin, I would agree that they've managed to make it work where it feels kind of claustrophobic, but he also like fucking loves it, clearly. And it's always fun to watch one of those characters. It's very much like a Bryan Cranston in Breaking Bad as well, right? When he's like getting into a tighter and tighter fit, and he's like, oh, there must exist a perfect combination of words somewhere to solve this. And he's just trying to lie and scheme his way through everything. And that's exactly what the Penguin is doing here, where it's like things are kind of getting worse all of the time, but he's just kind of playing everybody against each other, and he has no loyalty to anyone, obviously, and you know, aims to end up on top, but could easily, I mean, I knew he wasn't going to die in this episode because the show's called The Penguin and it's episode 2, right? But it's still like they do a great job of building up that tension where he might get totally outed by the faction that he's currently playing, and then next episode he could be on the run or whatever. And I don't know how it's going to end either, to be fair, even though, you know, he'll probably end up as the boss of the city. But then I feel like he could maybe die at the end also, and that'd be interesting too. So yeah, in general, it's a very competent second episode, much like the first one. It continues to build on what was there in the first one, and I think we want to talk maybe some specifics, but is there anything you want to put before a spoiler warning here?
The word I was looking for was contrived. Even though obviously it all is contrived, but it just doesn't feel like they find a nice balance where it feels organic. It feels like you believe that he can work his way through these situations. And I think, the important element, like you mentioned, is that he almost likes being in those. He enjoys like the pressure being put on. But I think outside of that, I think we can get into, like, now when we say spoilers, we're just going to talk about plot points. We don't know anything beyond these episodes, but if you haven't watched any of them and you want to go in fresh, this is where we bid you adieu.
Ayo, this is AI-generated bullshit. AI-generated bullshit by AI Jacob. Here we go. Spoiler alert, we're gonna spill the beans. No turning back, no living in your dreams. We'll reveal secrets and we'll blow your mind. Darth Vader was dead the whole time. And in The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis was that kid's dad. Dumbledore killed Snape, made all the kids sad. Man, you can't control these spoiler bars. And the Planet of the Apes was actually Mars.
Gotta love that AI, baby. So going back to the first episode, since we didn't discuss spoilers really last week when we were talking about episode 1, it is a great moment where he kills the Falcone son there, or Falcone, who is played by, I forget his name, from Mrs. Maisel, who I do like that actor. I was trying to think of his Maisel character's name. Joel?
Michael Zegan is the actor, right? Yeah, he's Joel in
Joel Maisel. Ah, shit. This is actually one thing I want to talk about before spoilers, but we can talk about it as spoilers as well. But did you recognize, this just reminded me, hold on, what's the character's name? Because who's the new Falcone, Sophia's uncle? God damn it. I'm trying to pull up the... it's not Luca. Is it Luca?
I think it might be Luca. Yeah, Scott Cohen. Is that right?
Yeah. Did you recognize him?
No. What? I'm face blind. What am I supposed to know him from?
Well, I mean, to continue our thing on Cut to Black is we would always talk about Gilmore Girls. Even though we're talking about The Sopranos, we would talk about Gilmore Girls. And the Penguin is reaching out and like holding our hearts in their hands because they know what butters our bread. Because Scott Cohen, who plays Luca Falcone, was Max Medina on Gilmore Girls. The original Max, the original Lorelai, who he was Rory's teacher, like English or history teacher. And Lorelai started a relationship with him. He ended up proposing. He sent the 1,000 daisies or whatever it was. They were going to get married, but Lorelai backed out. It was this whole thing. He was a recurring character, big deal on Gilmore Girls. And here he is, Luca Falcone on the Penguin.
Amazing. I would never, ever have put that together. I thought it was going to be, when I saw Gilmore Girls, I was like, oh no, I thought it was going to be someone even more central than him, that I'm just like, should have clearly known who it was. And I mean, I probably should have clearly known who that was, but I barely even spotted Michael Zegan of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. So,
and
he does
also on Marvelous Mrs. Maisel as a smaller part.
That's right.
Continue.
Yeah, no, I didn't spot him. I'm already on board with this headcanon of because Max does disappear from Gilmore Girls. We don't know where he goes. He could be reconnecting with his family, back in Gotham. We don't know. It could be the same universe. So yeah, I could see it. I always knew there was something off about him.
But yeah, anyways, as I was saying, I like how he does turn on Joel from Mrs. Maisel. Well, he doesn't turn on him. Joel from Mrs. Maisel at the beginning of episode 1 on the Penguin. I'm sorry if I'm being confusing with my references, but, he laughs at Oz Cobb, and that's one thing you don't do. Because maybe I'm a mark. Maybe I should have seen this coming, but I totally expected that character to be like the main antagonist of the Penguin's going to be like, oh, okay, sure, whatever, boss. but then he'd be the guy whispering in his ear like, oh, so-and-so, the worm tongue, if you will. Brad Dourif, the voice of Chucky, by the way. The worm tongue, if you will, in that character's ear, but then he kills him within the first scene, and then it becomes all about, getting rid of the body and then not getting caught, and I liked how that played out.
Yeah, he's definitely set up, even in like the minute before that scene, as like, this character is going to at least be around for the full first episode, surely. So it is, they successfully make it quite surprising when the Penguin just shoots him right there and then. I really like that scene in general because, Cobb or the Penguin is playing him, but then I like in this show that he's not a mastermind and he keeps saying things that are kind of a little off. He kind of lets things slip almost, and Sophia Falcone picks up on a lot of his bullshit. And this character, Joel from Mrs. Maisel, he picks up on some of his like, hey, you want to be that mafia guy, don't you? And he makes fun of him and then just gets shot immediately. It's good, yeah. So that was episode 1. Getting back to episode, was there any more spoilers? I guess in episode, I guess that's like the big, everything in episode 1 kind of revolves around that. So
yeah, that's the big thing. Him getting rid of the body and then but also not getting caught, and his relationship with Vic, how that starts out. I do want to say, I think Kristen Milioti, who's Sophia, she's great on this show as well. I always like her and stuff I see her in. I know she was on I think she was on that episode of Black Mirror, the Star Trek one. She's also in the movie Palm Springs, which is really great. And I like what she brings to this. I didn't quite, to jump around a little bit, I watched I don't know if people watch these a lot, but at the end of episode 2, the HBO always does these things where they have like the writers and showrunners like talk about the episode a little bit. And they were talking about the Hangman storyline because her whole thing is that she was just released from Arkham. People are afraid of her. She's apparently this notorious serial killer. And in that little like behind the scenes segment, the writers are like, we do know, like we get the impression that the Hangman didn't quite play out the way everyone thinks, but that's just what everyone thinks. And I'm like, I didn't pick up on that at all. So were there hints in this episode that maybe she's not the Hangman, or maybe it isn't quite as everyone perceives, that she killed 7 women or whatever it is?
Well, I don't think that. I could read that as just like we've been told that she's a serial killer and has killed 7 women, but why did she kill them? I guess is the thing. I don't think it's going to be like she was innocent, because fucking look into her eyes, she's fucking crazy. Clearly a murderer, so not too much of a shock there. But I guess the question for me would be just like what led up to that, and probably whatever led up to that is going to be related to why she is, as crazy as a kettle of fish. That's the saying, I think. So,
What I also appreciate about this character, because, I mean, even though I'm into comics and stuff like that, I don't know too deep on DC characters. So obviously, like, the main crazy lady from Arkham that I know is Harley Quinn. And so it feels like it would be very easy to almost do like an archetype of that character. And at least so far, it's not like I'm not really getting glimpses of that at all. Like you're not seeing echoes of that, because you're right. She plays like a weird, subdued crazy, and it's a lot in her eyes. And I think that's why I like her performance a lot, because she's got big bug eyes. So good for her. I think that helps an actor.
Yeah.
No, just
sure.
But no, I think it's like nice and subdued, but like you feel a threat there. And I think that really works, because you could easily, and again, maybe I'm speaking too soon, they will have this scene where she's like laughing and being crazy, and you're like, oh, that's Harley Quinn. But so far, we're not getting that.
Yeah, she's really good in The Resort as well, a TV show that you recommended to me.
I love The Resort.
Yeah, sort of in the off season when I don't think we had a TV podcast. We might have had a podcast about television podcasts at the time, which you can find at showswhatyouknow.com. But yeah, no, she's great, which is good, because the whole show kind of revolves around their relationship, more or less. I mean, I like all the other characters. I like Vic. It's a good good storyline to follow someone entering into this world. And, there's a bunch of smaller characters that definitely fill functions, but the scene between Sophia Falcone, the Hangman, and Oz Cobb and the Penguin in the first episode, where they're kind of playing a cat and mouse game, that was for me like, wow, this is really good. And that even within the first episode, she's got him in a chair naked, torturing him, but he manages to outmaneuver her and convince her that he's on her side, or at least isn't a traitor. But where we start in the second episode, it's a great end point that we get to here as well, where by the end of episode 2, he has successfully kind of convinced her that he's on her side. So it's going to be the two of them against the Falcone establishment, which is great. What a fantastic setup, because she's also the person, it seems like, most likely to see through his bullshit, but he's managed to fool her. So it's a really precarious situation that he's put himself into. And yeah, I think that the tension between the two of them, I could easily see her coming out on top in this situation, right? And if not, it's going to be by the skin of his teeth that he gets by. So whereas the Penguin seems very able to outmaneuver a lot of the other type characters that he runs into, versus with her, I'm like, he could be very quickly just fucked.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also, like, the thing with Vic that I like, even though, like, it was a big part of the first episode, and it's like a slow build, like more kind of background a little bit in this episode. I mean, we see him kind of stare at some of the missing posters for a moment. We've already gotten hints that where he grew up is gone completely because of the floods. It's even brought up again when Oz introduces him to the cam girl, and they're kind of having a quick discussion, and she kind of quickly reads like, oh, this is not something he wants to get into. And then by the end, when Vic kind of doesn't fulfill his end of the bargain of planting the diamonds, which works out better in the end, but it still could have been fatal for Oz. He has to kind of teach him a lesson, like make him lay down with the bodies. And I realized, like, even though we don't have a ton with Vic, I like this actor a lot that plays him, because he does just feel like a kid who's just caught up in the only avenue he has. But then I have scary thoughts of like, oh, well, this is the situation where by the end, the Penguin kills this kid. You know what I mean? To make it seem like, to give us that moment of like, no, fuck you for, well, if this was David Chase, maybe this would happen. No, fuck you for liking the Penguin, because he's the guy that does only care about himself. And we kind of made you root for this kid, even though we were rooting for him going down the bad road, and it like worked out the way it did, where he ends up shitty. Like, he's gonna get fucked over either way, maybe not killed, but like, I don't know. Like, I realize, like, even with, like, he's got a good amount of screen time, but not a ton of like plot yet, but there's enough where I worry about him.
I think you might be onto something there. I would say in the offices of the Penguin, where they're making this show, they have two dials. One says MCU on it, and the other one says The Sopranos on it. And I know it's DC, not MCU, right? But how much MCU do they want to be? How much The Sopranos do they want to be? Because if they pull the Sopranos dial all the way to the top, then the Penguin absolutely kills Vic, or at least allows him to be killed to save his own life before the end of the season. That would be a great way to make this. This is a mini-series. We are done after this, right? If it was like, they might want to keep him around and develop this relationship or whatever, if there were more seasons. If it's a mini-series, you got to kill Vic. If it's, if you want to go full Sopranos. Now, you can go full MCU, where it's like, it ends with the Penguin, he's the boss of the city, and now Vic, he's the one who's running the club, like the Penguin was at the start. But maybe there's a hint that the Vic is going to try to take stuff over. Less dramatic, less interesting, still probably pretty good, because I am still liking all the indulgent stuff that's in this. I'm liking the gunfights and everything that would not happen in The Sopranos. But yeah, it remains to be seen where they want to go. But I think you might have hit the nail on the head there, because it is in the background, it is developing. They're getting closer, but slowly, and that could be a great way to cap off the season.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, we see more of his mother here again. I think this is part of what was in the trailer here, because it's when he puts the jazz record on and they dance, but she's also she's putting the pressure on him here in a great way of like using her motherly advice to be like, well, if you're nobody, then what does that make me? And, from what we know about Oz so far is he does want to, he wants to please his mom. I mean, he also does want it too. He does want to be like the ruler of the city or whatever, but this is giving him that extra pressure and that extra push because he wants to show his mom that he can do it. And I do like that we then have like that story when he's talking to Sophia at I keep spacing on his name. What is it? Alberto. At Alberto's funeral. And he talks about how when his brothers died and dealing with his mother, and most likely, I guess that probably is true, but we're quickly reminded that Oz is a liar because then he says that his mother's dead or she died a few years ago. He never got a chance to ask her because he tells the story of how she wouldn't get out of bed for weeks, maybe even a month, until one day she did get up and then they went out and they danced to live jazz somewhere. So it rings very true, but then she's like, well, what changed for her? And he's like, I don't know. She died a couple of years back. Now, that also could be a very useful lie because he doesn't want anyone to know he has a weak spot. Like if his mother is out there, obviously, if he has enemies that want to come for him, that's a great avenue. But also he could just be a liar because he wants to lie and he wants to get in with this person because he's manipulating everyone. So
I mean, he especially does not want the hangman to know where his mother is, right? That would be the worst thing. But I think that he is pulling from it. I think that is a true story because I think that's kind of his strength in this, that he's manipulating people by pulling on true things from his life. It's the same thing he did in the first episode with Alberto or Joel from Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, when he's telling him about this fantastic mop guy who used to be in the neighborhood and people respected him and there used to be respect and all this stuff that's a true thing, and he's revealing that, and that leads to this guy laughing at him, which leads to him killing him. So, yes. But I think he's pulling and I've seen there's a few scenes, and it's kind of when it happens as well, I'm like, this is that prestige TV thing that people do where people are telling each other stories. It's such a classic thing. It became in Breaking Bad. It got to the stage where I was like, oh, someone's starting a story. I guess we're going to sit in this for a while, where they overused it a little bit. But I think it's a great way to have actors really show off basically and have a scene turn on something dramatic, is have someone tell something about their past or whatever, and that convinces them. And it doesn't happen in, a lower quality show usually, or if it does, because that has to kind of live more on the external action, whereas just a conversation between two people making that tense and interesting, that's what is the mark of a really good show, I think, and so far they're nailing that.
Yeah. And one quick thing that they pointed out as well in kind of the post-episode discussion, which I didn't quite pick up on, but I guess I do kind of like it. I mean, we do meet Nadia Maroney in this episode when Oz goes to see Salvatore in prison, who's played by Clancy Brown. Clancy Brown's awesome. And they were talking about how they kind of had this decision to have Salvatore's wife be Nadia and have his family is filled more with Persian mobsters. And I was like, oh, you know what? I didn't even think of it. And at the very least, I guess I like it because, as a partial Italian myself, it's like, we get it. Italians are fucking mobsters. Come on. So even though we have Salvatore Maroni, his crew is, it's more like it is Persian. And so that way at least breaks it up where it's not like, yeah, we get it. All Italians are fucking mobsters. So it was a small thing I didn't quite pick up on until they were talking about it. And I was like, you know what? I kind of like that decision a little bit.
I just went into her Wikipedia article and cast list, and fun fact, that lady is 72 years old, looks fantastic, and it plays the voice of Gozer in Ghostbusters Afterlife.
She has quite a voice. It's really hard to pin down because it's like the raspy, like hot lady voice, but like on a whole different level. And I did recognize her. Yeah, she was on 24. I was like, because I know her from something. But she's been in a ton of stuff as well. Yeah, Star Trek Beyond, The Expanse I never saw. But yeah, well, what's nice about her too, and maybe part of it's the voice, part of it's obviously the performance, is you do buy her as like a kind of cold-hearted mobster that like could be in this position. You know what I mean? It doesn't come off as it fits.
Yeah, I mean, she's the voice of one of the Quarian admirals in Mass Effect 2 and 3, so how could it not fit? That's authority right there. That's power. But yeah, we've talked all this stuff about the episode. We haven't even mentioned like the main plot of the episode, which I mean, we don't need to break it down beat by beat, right? But the main thing that all of this turns on is that there's, as ordered in the previous episode, Oz needs to move his operation out of where it's at, just get all the drugs out of there. He tells the other crime family that's not his crime family that, I'm going to move this stuff, come and take it, basically. But then he ends up being forced into, well, not forced, but just kind of pressured into going in the other van, the van that he wasn't supposed to be in as per the plan, which leads to a great shootout in the first few minutes of the episode. Already, they've managed to establish that and set the stakes. And then that, the fallout from that, the search for who was the leak that let them know that this transport was happening at this time. All of that is happening while the character he killed in the first episode is getting buried as well. So that's kind of the main plot that the episode turns on. But there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on throughout.
And again, to pull from the Post thing, but they were talking about the guns they use. They developed their own guns for that, where they actually are lights on the guns. So, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of talk about using real guns on set. I mean, a tragedy that happened, 2 years ago, whatever it was. They developed when you rewatch it, those are actually flashes built onto their fake guns they have, like there are lights on it. So they could have the muzzle flashes without actually using real guns. I thought it was a nice touch.
Yeah. And it's the sort of thing that would never happen on The Sopranos. So it's kind of like that dial, like 6-7 seasons. Did you ever see like Tony Soprano do something like that? Not really, because the car crashes and people are being shot left, right, and center. It's awesome. That's the thing. You don't get awesome stuff. You only get depressing stuff on The Sopranos, and that's where they really have to decide where to draw the line. But remains to be seen.
To nitpick a little bit, they tried to do the thing where like an old styly song like kicked in when that, little mini car crash thing happened. I didn't think that felt a little derivative of like, we get it. It's a mob movie. But again, I mean, this is just me like picking nits. I'm just saying some things I didn't immediately love. But that heats up. That's the whole thing of him having to choose. Like the plan was supposed to be everyone basically dies, and then there wouldn't be, there would still be some heat, but not the same amount of heat that he has to take, and how he got out of the situation with the Maroney family, and how he was that's how they know that someone's on the inside, and obviously we know it's Oz, and are they on his case or not? Luca is kind of trying to be more of an offhands approach, so he's not as much of a threat. But Sophia, she's the one that's really like spearheading this witch hunt for the inside man, and they come very close to getting our boy Oz.
Yeah, I like how the character who did the torturing of Oz in the first episode is kind of here, right? Because he seems to be Sophia's right-hand man, kind of just, or her main grunt doing work for him, and Oz at the start of the episode puts him in the van to get killed, but then when he himself, Oz, ends up in that van or in the wrong vehicle himself. He actually kills someone else to save him, to give himself an alibi. But by the end of the episode, he's kind of navigated things that wasn't planned from the start, but just navigated things so that he gets killed as a traitor. Like, he's the inside person who gets shot, which also means that Sofia Falcone does not have that right-hand man anymore, allowing him to kind of slide into that position, which is not what the plan was from the start. And I guess that's the scrambling we're talking about that's so satisfying to watch, because it's kind of like watching someone build a house of cards while it's also coming apart, that sort of thing, and they're kind of trying to get it back together, and that's the scramble of that is what's made this show very entertaining so far. So yeah, I think that's mostly it. I mean, Sofia Falcone goes to see a therapist in the first scene. We could get back to that maybe, because I'm sure that character is going to come back later, because that's just a weird thing where he's like fondling her up basically, and she's obviously criminally insane, but I'm sure that's how we will explore what actually happened to those 7 women or whatever. So look forward to that in the next couple episodes. But yeah, sorry, Jim, what were you going to say there?
Well, I was going to say it does build a thing, because Oz's thing was he was supposed to go in and save the guy from the Maroney family, because they took one of their gang from the hospital, and that was the threat, because he could give up Oz's name. But he had to kill him for, the betterment of his plan. So, again, it is an extra thread where I'm sure we'll have to see how that plays out, because he's going to have to smooth that over in some way with the Maroney family, because his main goal that they gave him was to go get our man and, save him. Yeah. It's just,
which is great, because they already in this episode were gonna stab him in the chest. Now that was mostly posturing and a threat to get more stuff out of him, right? But he is a double agent who is playing both sides and trying to come out on top himself. And that means that though this episode ends, and he's like, oh great, he's now Sophia's right-hand guy or whatever, and they're going to take on the Falcones together. But then he's already fucked over the other people who he's also said he's going to take on the Falcones together with, right? So now it's more of a triangle, who's going to play off against who, and yeah, I don't know. I'm still really on board with this show.
Yeah, we're in.
We're in.
But yeah, I guess that's about that, right? Was there anything else?
That's about that, Jim. I think we got to wrap it up there. Now, obviously, go to our YouTube channel to subscribe and listen and watch the show at youtube.com/showswhatyouknow. You can also find the podcast at showswhatyouknow.com or on your podcatcher of choice. Is there anything else, Jim?
You can hit us up at, you may have already said this, showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. If for whatever reason, if you want to just say hi, if you want to just hang out, you ever want to just chat, please rate, review, subscribe, smash that like button, hit the thumbs up, and hit the motherfucking bell.
Yeah, that's right.
On that.
Hit that bell.
See you later, everybody.
We our show's what you know. We'll always watch TV, and if you think we can't, we'll watch more and you'll see. That's why the people of the web believe in Jim from Las Vegas and Jacob from Sweden.